So our final award recipient is for the Tier 1 Clinical Mentoring Award, and that's for Dr. Kim Solez. He received his BA from Oberlin College in Ohio, and for those of you who don't know, that's a small liberal arts private school in the U.S.
Strong in music.
Very strong, yeah. Actually, a number of very famous people have come from there.
Yeah.
He received his MD with honors and distinction in research from the University of Rochester. He completed internship, residency, and fellowship at the Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. And I guess liked it enough there. He stayed there as an assistant and associate professor at the University School of Medicine there. And in 1987, he was recruited here to the University of Alberta to become the chair of what was then the Department of Pathology, and completed a term as chair there. And then he's also been a pathologist here at the University Hospital since that time as well. He's currently in the a professor in the Department of Lab Medicine and Pathology, so one of these other departments that's gone through reorganization and name changes over the years. And he's the director of experimental pathology. He's published over 162 papers over his career, and he was also noted and instrumental in setting up the Banff classification of transplant pathology. He's trained a number of mostly primarily medical trainees from what I can see, and students and residents. And but he has served on graduate student supervisory committee, because I remember we served on one in the early 90s together. I remember that. And he's had several of his students are now in the top of the pathology field worldwide, so he's had a significant influence on pathology throughout the world. Some of the comments: Professor Solez is very well suited for this award, as he's an extraordinary mentor for an entire generation of students and more. He was a warm, patient, and generous teacher, and my work with him fueled my desire to pursue medical training. Another one said, as a newly minted physician, I knocked on his door to talk about doing research, a research project, and what should have been a very intimidating experience for me became a wonderful, nurturing one, in which I realized I had a passion for research, so we ignited that passion in students. He taught me to think outside the box and challenge the status quo today, because the future will be much different. Because he's unafraid of incorporating diverse streams of ideas into one thought, I've also learned to be appreciative of the value of different areas of academics. So, congratulations.
So I teach a course on technology and the future of medicine, and when Leslie Cormack, the Dean of Arts, spoke in that course, both the Dean of Science and the Dean of Arts teach there, she said, and now for something completely different. And I think you'll find that that's true, that this is somewhat different from what you've heard before. One thing that has made mentoring easy for me is that I do love my work. I always have, and that just simplifies things a very great deal. It's easy to make your students enthusiastic if you are enthusiastic about what you're doing yourself. This is the Trans-Canada Pipeline Pavilion at the Banff Centre, which is where the Banff classification began. And this is what I'm known most for, and most of my trainees are somehow associated with the work of transplant pathology. So we began in the kidney, but now the Banff meetings cover all solid organ transplantation. It's the only game in town worldwide. There is nothing else competing with it. Dr. Lorraine Rackison, who wrote one of the strongest letters in support of this award, and the dean's letter informing me that I got the award mentioned her letter, was my first well-known trainee. Here you see her sitting in the center of this group of people important in the Banff meetings, the Banff classification. And this has very much been a joint thing. It's now in its 25th year. Number of publications associated with it in 2015 is higher than it's ever been. So you'd think something that's a quarter of a century old would be winding down and not important anymore, but publication-wise, it's more important now than it ever has been. And there were years when she did almost all the work. There were also years when I did almost all the work. And so it's a very equal partnership between the two of us. So I trained her. I also trained Banu Sis and David Rayner. The David Rayner situation is quite interesting. I recruited him as a faculty member when I was chair here, and then I taught him kidney pathology. So that's a bit unusual, the way that worked. And here you see some other trainees of mine from the early period all over the world, Macedonia, Nigeria, Scotland, Thailand, Russia. My mentees have come from almost all countries and all continents. There are a total of 51 of them. And the thing I was realizing just yesterday is I have had no conflict with any of these 51 that I can remember. Now, many of you will think that means I'm a bad mentor, but I think what it does mean is I don't push people very much. I think I probably, inspire them, but I don't make them do things that they don't want to do very often. So that's why these 51 people have remained my friends, and that will play into other things that I want to mention. Now, almost all of you who are on the faculty have your own office. And you would never think of sharing that office with other people. Why would that happen? But that has happened to me, and it's worked out very well. And what I'm about to tell you, I'm not saying that any of the rest of you should do this, but just that this has become my work life, and it works very well. So since May 15th, 2015, I have inhabited the best room on our floor, the most fun room, the room that has the most interesting art and artifacts, and shared that with fellows, students, a sort of rotating pool of young people between 18 and 29, and we share that room. Now you might say, well, how does that work? Well, one interesting thing is that my day starts before theirs. So I have these golden hours, 2 or 3 hours in the morning, where this beautiful room, and it's just me, and I can do whatever the heck I want. And then mid-morning, Corey Fung, who's shooting the video there, describes it as the students rolling in. So I know that's an interesting metaphor. So around 9:30 or 10, young people start to come in, and then the character, what goes on in the room, changes, and my activities are a little bit restricted because I don't want to do things that are really, inhibiting the other people who are studying, working, and so on. But it's been going on now for more than a year. It's clear that this will work for the long term, and it keeps me young in a way you cannot imagine. To have your work life where you're constantly interacting with young people throughout the day is really, really fun. Now, when you walk in that room, it's called cybernephrology, the first thing you see is this picture of the Beatles, the Fab Four. And I got the idea that I need to acknowledge the significant role of the other 3 kidney pathologists in mentoring the people I have mentored. They have played a very significant role. And one way to honor them would be to get a picture of the four of us together. You might think that there would be many such pictures, but there never have been. So there are four of us, and there are no pictures of the four of us together. So I thought, why not take this picture of the Beatles as kind of a model and do the best we can to come up with a similar picture. So this is our attempt. And you can see how very, very close this is. You can hardly tell the difference between the Beatles and us. You know, it's almost identical. So there. And there's another significant influence. Now, you know that I was the chair in 1987. And in 2007, I was a candidate for the chair again. And when I was about to give my visioning talk, the vice dean leaned over to me and whispered something very disturbing. He said, "What would Leonard Cohen do in this circumstance?" And to any of you, this may be a ridiculous thing, but actually Leonard Cohen is sort of interwoven in my life in a very significant way. I spent a 3-day weekend with him in November 2005. I only left because I had a plane to catch. I was so afraid he'd be bored with me, but he had many more questions for me than I had for him. He was fascinated by what a physician career is like, and so that is. And what were his impressions? Now this may be identical to some of your impressions. He felt I was surreal, that I didn't realize I was surreal, and that I was serially surreal. I was surreal over and over and over again without realizing it. So you may come in this presentation to agree with him completely. And then in 2007, something absolutely remarkable happened. So between 1997 and 2007, I ran a very well-funded enterprise from the U.S. National Kidney Foundation called cybernephrology, with a budget of about $400,000 US per year. And in 2007, executive director of the National Kidney Foundation US informed me two things. And these things seem like opposite of each other, but he had two messages. First, that they could no longer afford us, they could no longer pay for our support. But secondly, he wished cybernephrology to continue. He said, "I don't care how you do it, but we want you to keep going even though we're not going to give you a cent from this point onward." So what's the solution to that? We see all these young people in the room, and so I got students to do the work that we had these well-established 10-year templates of highly paid professionals doing this stuff. And I just assigned the same role to students, paid them hardly anything. But they gave them jobs unique in all the world, that they were doing things no other student, no other person their age was doing that. And that pays off. It's not monetary compensation, but they end up being able to claim skills that very few young people have. Skills of organizing a $250,000 medical meeting every 2 years, things like that. And so that has been the way that it has gone. And so that is the reason why I'm so comfortable then, because they are the people who have been supporting me all these years since 2007. My daily interactions, getting things done, all the projects that I do, they are enabled by the students who are working with me. And because of that, to share a room with them is very comfortable. To go to the mountains with them is. I took a random sampling, not sort of selected students, but just random students, and went to the mountains with them for the weekend. We had a fantastic time. And my fellow, Asel gave me this card, the only card I've ever gotten with a Superman sign on it. When we got back from that weekend, dear Dr. Solez, thank you for the happiest trip I've ever had. And I think, believe it or not, the others felt that way too. So anyway, so it's kind of cool. So I teach this course on technology and the future of medicine, which teaches about the technological singularity, the point in time when machines are smarter than first individual human beings in 2029, and then the whole human race in 2045. And you may be shaking your head now and saying, well, that's not true, but actually there's considerable evidence for that. There's only one other course in the world that teaches about this. It is a required medical student course at Semmelweis University in Budapest. And we would like to disseminate this, to have courses like this in every university in the world, every medical school in the world. And actually the first year medical students this year have suggested that I should abandon the idea of them taking this course. We should instead incorporate the important information they need from the course into the courses they're already taking. And since they suggested that, I am indeed pursuing that. And it's a very exciting thing for me. Now, you may wonder whether there's anything consequential going on in a course like this. Many of you are like politicians. The future interests you until the next significant event, like the next, election or something like that, and not much beyond that. And you have significant resistance to somebody forcing you to think of a long-range future because it just doesn't seem relevant. And so we're facing that. And so one of the things I thought about, there are two things significant to me about this mentoring award. This award is very valuable to me because it's a way of kind of leveraging the award to make things happen in my life. Various initiatives probably would be hard to have happen otherwise. It also sort of legitimizes my sharing this office with the young people that I'm sharing with, because if I've won a mentoring award, then maybe I'm sort of an okay guy to hang out with. Otherwise, you could imagine they're pretending to be happy, but actually it's such a cruel environment that, if they could only tell you the pain and the horror of sharing an office with Dr. Solez. So what would these initiatives be that would be enhanced by my winning this award? I've created a new discipline in pathology, tissue engineering pathology, stem cell generated organs, and that sort of thing. We also have the idea of saving the world from artificial intelligence gone wrong. So you may not think that's a significant risk, but a lot of people more famous than you do think it's a risk. Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and all those guys are talking about the risk of this. And in our computing science faculty here, we have Rich Sutton, who has, I think, the only reasonable idea about how humans are going to survive this, which is that we have to be honest, empathetic. When there are machines as smart as we are, we have to come clean with them. We have to tell them the truth and have a cooperative co-evolution with them. And so I'm not saying we're saving the world, I'm saying Rich Sutton is saving the world, and in a little small way, we're helping him do that by promoting his ideas in the course. It's been recently suggested to me that we should make this much bigger, that we have had significant participation from faculty of science, faculty of arts. The university, as you know, has 20 units, faculties or other components, that we should reach out to all of them as well as to Athabasca University and to the Banff Center, and then it probably should go beyond the province and so on. You get the idea. If we're saving the world, why should we make this small? Why not make it bigger? Okay, then it cannot be done with lecturing. Some of you are probably tired of me talking. I've been talking for a short time, but many people in the general public who should be receiving the messages we would like to give would get tired of me talking even sooner than you have. And so we need another way to reach them. And so poetry, represented by at least 4 people here today who are poets professionally, they're in amongst you. You probably had no idea that they had infiltrated the room they had. But, you know, musicians, you need to use all modalities of human communication to get these important ideas out there. And that's what this initiative is, the future and all that jazz. We've also noticed significant communication problems in our ordinary clinical practice. As you know, there's a new clinical information system coming. There's funding for that. There's a new lab information system coming. Are those going to correct these physician communication problems? So we're looking at that. And finally, what about humor? I didn't mention humor. Humor is tougher than you might think. I've taken stand-up comedy courses and improv comedy courses. It's the toughest thing I've ever done. You meet people every day who are naturally funny. I'm not one of them. So for me to be funny is like really tough. But you're aware that Arya Sharma has this skill. He's the only physician from the Faculty of Medicine, have his own fringe show, and he's giving entertaining talks across Canada because he faces resistance similar to the resistance I face to people thinking about the long-range future. People all have biases about, you know, obesity, and they're all wrong about that, and so to get through to people is extremely difficult. So he and I and our students are collaborating. Now, you probably think this list of 5 is it. I mean, this guy is limited. How could he have more than 5 initiatives? But no, there are actually 7 or 8, but these are the only 5 that are practically talked about today. And if that's been too complex for you, you can think of 3 10-year periods here. Initially, I ran something that had funded professionals in it, receiving appropriate salaries for the work they were doing. Then from 2007 to now, I've had students doing those roles. And we could imagine leveraging this mentoring award to make it possible so that we would once again then perhaps have a mix of professional and student staff in the future. Now, the poets in my life and musicians are shocked at this top picture here because that doesn't look like the Kim Solez that they know. They know somebody much more comfortably attired and so on. This looks like a sort of terminally differentiated mode of being that would have limits, whereas down at the bottom there, that looks like a mode of being that could maybe continue in the long term. So Dr. Mengel, who is my superior, suggested that as a consequence of this mentoring award, that I could lose the tie. And he didn't say anything about the hat, you see, but like losing the tie goes with the hat. So, and when I tell you that one of the big things about the course that I teach is this idea that we are not passive victims of the future, that we can actually shape the future. I give you the opportunity to shape the future by telling me, is this the mode you prefer, or were you shocked when the tie cake came off and you want it back? But finally, I want to tell you about Buzz Aldrin and you and Mallory Chipman, because I'm afraid I may leave you a little bit frustrated, still feeling you cannot influence the future. I'm going to give you here a way in which you very much can influence the future. Now, in 2014, I went to the International Space Development Conference in Los Angeles, and I was in the same program as Buzz Aldrin. It was the second person to set foot on the moon. And I was a bit concerned. He was announced as the next speaker, and he was sitting at a table in the main part of the auditorium. It was a rather high stage, and the stairs to the stage are there, and he was not going in either of those stairway directions. So he's 84, or he was 84 then. He's 86 now. And as you may know, it's been his habit for many years to do this running leap onto the stage. I didn't know this. Anyway, he runs to the stage, leaps up, and then there's this moment when you can't see him and you think, oh yeah, this is the demise of this old guy. It's really sad. So then he pulls himself up so you can finally see him over the podium and starts speaking, and people clap and so on. Well, Mallory Chipman did exactly the same thing when we went to the Leonard Cohen international event in 2014. She's 21, a bit younger than Buzz. But anyway, I was impressed by that, and I wrote this poem, Buzz Aldrin and You Leaping on Stage, for Mallory Chipman. She's a singer. She has a video in the rehearsal in Dublin with your mother watching. When you leapt on stage from the floor, I saw in a moment that you and Buzz Aldrin were counterbalancing forces and more. Watching the grace with which you moved, one knew that humanity was going to be all right. As one also felt watching 84-year-old Buzz teetering at the podium after a jump onto the stage with might. He steadied himself and started speaking. You steadied yourself and started playing and singing. It was plain that by combining the Buzz and Mallory forces in the world, the forces of evil and darkness don't stand a chance, can't be bold. Buzz Aldrin's leaps on stage are legendary and inspire astronauts from afar. Yours are no less inspiring, wonderfully musical, and also reach the stars. So go Buzz, go Mallory, keep on keeping on. Humanity needs that transcendent leaping as a force to rely upon. Now that may seem to you like wonderful poetry, but you're wrong. This is sort of modest, okay for a doctor, but you hope he keeps his day job. But Mallory was inspired by that poem to write her own very short poems. So for those of you who think we're running along, this is only 12 lines. Little Leaps by Mallory Chipman. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, so Armstrong said. The year man leaped into the cratered white moon. But leaps don't start as leaps or as giant. Leaps start as teensy tiny footsteps, one after another, pitter-patter, right, left. Tiny steps become long strides as the child grows, as the student becomes colleague, as the dreamer becomes an astronaut or a teacher or an artist. Long strides evolve into bounds as the artist reaches out towards mastery. And finally, the bounds become giant leaps as the artist understands, as the artist pushes mastery far away and embraces the key ingredient, imperfection. Only then do the seemingly insignificant footsteps become sizeless, priceless, fearless leaps. So that's Mallory Chipman's poem. She has just received funding for and recorded her first album. And so you'd probably now be thinking, I'd tell you this is on the album, you should buy the album. Wrong. What I'm telling you is there's a role for you here because she has a large body of work because even though she's only 21 years of age, and so accomplished young people, this happens. And so that poem didn't make the cut for the first record. So you can go on her website, and if you like the poem, recommend that it be on the second one, and in that way, you all can directly influence the future. Mallory sent a video.
Good afternoon, everybody, and congratulations, Kim, on being awarded the 2016 Clinical Mentoring Award. My name's Mallory Chipman, and I'm a good friend of Kim's. I would truly love to be there celebrating with all of you today because this is a well-deserved honor for Kim, but unfortunately, currently I am across town teaching music, and so I won't be able to be here. Kim wanted me to be there live with you all so that I could present a piece of poetry which I've written that Kim really enjoys. But since I can't be there, I decided to submit this video so that the poem could still be a part of the program this afternoon. This poem was written for a piece of music composed by local guitar player Brett Hansen. The piece of music was entitled Little Leaps. And using those two words as my inspiration, I took them and interpreted them in my own way and came up with this piece of poetry that Kim really enjoyed. So I'm happy to share it with you all in honor of him and his accomplishments today. So I do hope you all enjoy as much as Kim does our rendition of Little Leaps.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So Armstrong said the year man leaped off the cratered white moon. But leaps don't start as leaps, nor as giant. Leaps start as teensy tiny footsteps, one after another. Pitter-patter, right, left. Tiny steps become longer strides as the child grows, as the student becomes a colleague, as the dreamer becomes an astronaut or a teacher or an artist. Long strides evolve into bounds as the artist reaches out towards mastery. And finally, the bounds become giant leaps as the artist understands and pushes away mastery and embraces the key ingredient, imperfection. Only then do seemingly insignificant footsteps become sizeless, priceless, fearless leaps.
So that's the end. And I would remind you that there's lots of time for questions. Don't need to be questions now. There's 2 hours at the after party at Rouge Lounge between 5:30 and 7:30, Jasper and 117th. And there's a whole hour now out there with the food, so you can pepper me with questions then. Thank you very much.